Welcome, everybody, to the Nightly News Podcast. This is Professor Paul Miller, and we are back with two of our favorite guests. It's interesting. I just pointed out to our guests that this is the first time they've been on in a year for the Nightly News Podcast. Unfortunately, we have them on every time there is a foundation scholarship application open. And unfortunately, over the summer, we were not on campus. So this is the first time back for two of my favorite guests in a year. So we are being joined by the Education Foundation staff, Sandy Box and MaryBeth Fisher. So it's such a pleasure to have you back. I can't believe it's been so long.
Well, thank you for having us. It's exciting.
And we're also being joined by Nightly News reporter Alexa Sugart. Alexa, it's a pleasure to have you on your first ever podcast.
Thank you for having me.
And you know, it's funny because you sounded like you were a little bit nervous, but there's nothing to be nervous about.
No, I am pretty nervous, but I'm just trying to go with the flow and hope I do good.
Oh, you're going to do just fine. Don't worry. All you got to do is just answer questions when they come your way, so I wouldn't worry too much about it.
Sounds good.
Well, let's start off with something that's really important. So the way I introduced you was from the Education Foundation, but MaryBeth, you've kind of shifted your role here at the college. You've moved from the Education Foundation to the Advancement Office. Could you just share with us a little bit more about what that entails?
Sure, Paul. Well, the Advancement Office is a very large department now within the college. And in my role, I am working closely with the Alumni Association. We have our election of officers next week. We're revising, amending the bylaws. And we're doing a new structure of membership. So there's a lot that will be coming out next week for the Alumni Association.
But that being said, some of your previous experience with the foundation is going to shift right over into your new role, right? Part of your job duties in the past were to work with alumni. So this should be a pretty seamless transition, wouldn't you say?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And now every department is very focused on alumni. So we'll be seeing a lot of new things. I wish this interview was a week later.
That's fine. No.
I would have so much to share.
It's quite all right. And so just keep an eye out for some new updates and new discussions about what the Advancement Office is up to and how MaryBeth's going to continue working with our alumni. So but I'm so glad, and you're certainly welcome to continue joining us for our podcast.
I might
when
be.
we have you, because it's such a fun time to get to see you.
Well, thank you.
So I obviously the subject of our discussion today is the Central Penn College Education Foundation Scholarship Application. And so every time of the year that this is going on, we have the two of you in to talk a little bit more about not only just the question and how it changes from year to year, but also try to provide tips for students to fill this out. One of the things that I wanted to point out was how many students actually receive this in terms of those who apply. So just as a before we even get started, this is available at foundation.centralpenn.edu. It's available throughout the month of February. And I also had everybody in my class last night get out their phones and go to August 1st and put a reminder in their phones for August 1st to remind them that it's not only this time around, but it will also be available in August.
Very good.
So Sandy, let's talk a little bit about in terms of the sort of some behind-the-scenes logistics of this, maybe even asking some questions that I still don't know the answers to. I compel my students to fill this out. I talk to them about all the advantages of doing it, but then I also bring up some really surprising statistics. What would you say in terms of the amount of applicants? What percentage of them on a normal term? I know that sometimes terms are up and down with how many apply, but what percentage of students would you say typically receive some type of award?
I'd say based on the last three terms, the last three processes that we've gone through, I'm going to say about 75% of the students who apply. That's huge.
Incredible.
Right.
I mean, just to know that you've basically got a 3 out of 4 chance to receive something is pretty incredible to me. And really all you need is to fill out an essay. Now, I will say there are also some requirements that students who do apply would need to meet in order to be considered. Could you share with us what some of those requirements are?
Okay. So first off, there's a GPA requirement of 2.0. Now, as I sidetrack to that, what I want to say is even though there's a GPA of 2.0 that is required. I encourage all first-term students to apply. That way they can go through the whole process, and we'll hold their essay, we'll hold their application until their grades are posted, and then we go back and revisit that. So students don't have to wait 2 or 3 terms before they can apply for a scholarship at the very beginning. So that's the first requirement. The first requirement is the 2.0 GPA. The second requirement is, of course, they have to complete the essay. The essay is not a right or wrong. You can't get it wrong. It is about you, the student. It's a way for us to get to know you, the student, without actually sitting down and talking to you. So that's the second point. The other requirement that I have, and it's an absolute requirement that I do not bend on whatsoever, and that is you must submit a thank you note. If you are selected to receive a scholarship, the least that you can do for $500, that's the minimum. The minimum scholarship is $500. The largest scholarship that we give out is usually $2,000. The least you can do is submit a thank you. And then I forward those thank you notes on to the donors. They are thrilled when they hear the stories and just the thank you and the appreciation. They like to know that their donations are appreciated by our students.
There's also, if I'm not mistaken, a requirement that they have demonstrated some financial need. Can you explain a little bit more about what that means?
It is. It's a financially needy. That doesn't mean that you have to have a 0 EFC. It just means that you have some kind of need, and all of our students do. I think the last thing that I checked, the last figure that I had was 95% of our students that attend Central Penn College demonstrate some type of financial need. So it's really not something that you got to, I don't think I do. Yeah, there's a pretty good chance that you do demonstrate a financial need. And the way that you do that is by the completion of the FAFSA. That's the only way that we can determine your financial needs. So if you don't complete the FAFSA, you're not going to be eligible for the scholarship.
Understood. Now, let me ask you, you mentioned an EFC. What is that?
Estimated family contribution.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Yeah, because you have some lingo, and
right?
I'm trying to learn. Sandy, why this is important to me is I'm trying to learn because I am on the front lines advocating for this.
Right.
And these are a couple of the questions that I've gotten. Now, so you mentioned filling out the FAFSA. And that's a very important piece to this because that's how you're demonstrating financial need. Now, I spoke with a couple of students who maybe through the FAFSA didn't necessarily and maybe didn't qualify for some things, but just the fact that they filled it out is some demonstration of a financial need. Would you say that that's true?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So we've got a 2.0 GPA. We've got demonstrating a financial need, and we've got you got to write a thank you letter.
Absolutely.
How much easier could it possibly be?
It can't get any easier. And the fact of the matter is, like I said, the essay, you can't get it wrong. I mean, the essay can be wrong because you don't answer the question. But the way that you answer the question is not right or wrong. Perfect example is if I can share, this is the question for this term. How has your approach to college changed since the pandemic started? What positive steps did you take to overcome the challenges? And how would this scholarship impact your educational journey in 2021? There's no wrong answer, period. So it's not like you're scored, that's wrong, check off, you lose points for that. What you lose points for is your punctuation, your grammar, if you don't answer the question. If you just ramble on and don't answer the question, then the chances are your score is going to be low.
Sure.
Yep.
And so I do kind of just, one of the things that I wanted to kind of point out is I kind of want to recreate. I'm on the scholarship selection committee, of which, of course, the date that you picked for this term, I'm going to be off campus, but I'm still going to join the meeting because it's my favorite 2 hours of, every other quarter.
Right.
And I am so upset that I'm missing that day. I actually have class that day, so I'm not going to be able to make it, but I will be there virtually.
Okay.
So here, just as a recreation, basically every essay is scored by, I got to be honest, I don't even know who scores these.
Okay, so what happens is people sign up to evaluate the scholarship applications. So they
Alumni?
They may be alumni, they may be donors, they may be current employees, they may be board members. So it's a variety. It's
Community
a variety
members?
of people. Right, so it's a variety of people. And so what happens is, as every application is submitted, it is randomly sent to 5 different evaluators. So 5 different people look at the essay and score it from 0 to 10. Then those 5 scores, of course, are compiled and averaged. And at the end, when the scholarship application process closes, we get a list of all of the applicants and their average score from 0 to 10. And so that's one of the things that we use when we go into the selection committee. So 5 different people evaluate the application, and there is a committee of 10 or 12, because I increased it a little bit, minimum of 10, but I think I've increased it to 12 different people on the selection committee. And then that group, as Paul knows, we sit down, we look at the scores, we look at the GPA, we look at the financial need, we look at the major, and determine which applicants are eligible to receive which scholarships within the Education Foundation.
And that to me is one of the craziest things being at these meetings is you've got basically you're making it easy for everybody to apply for all of these different scholarships.
Correct.
You've got I don't want to say, but many
I have
scholarships.
66 scholarships, but they only have to fill out one application.
Right. And so basically by filling out that one application, they're basically entering into 66 scholarships. Now, some of them are very specific. I recall some of them by county, some of them by traditional versus non-traditional students,
Right.
major. So, but by filling out that one, they're really applying to all 66.
Right.
So, but and one of the, just because I want to bring Alexa in on this question here in a second, one of the things that I love about this, now obviously the people who score best are typically in line for some of the better awards, right? But what I love is once we get some of that done, then we kind of go around and nominate students.
Right.
And that's one of the things that I always tell my students, like, listen, I'm never going to guarantee you anything because I can't and won't do that.
Right.
But what I can tell you is if you've made a good impression on me, I will absolutely 100% advocate on your behalf.
Absolutely.
And that's one of the things that I take a lot of pride in. Alexa, I want to come to you. I want to talk about this question. So you are I guess technically still a freshman, but getting close to being a sophomore here at Central Penn, and you have transferred from another school. And so I guess what I would just be interested is to hear a little bit more about your thought process on this question. So just to repeat, how has your approach to college changed since the pandemic started, and what positive steps did you take to overcome any challenges?
So obviously with the pandemic, we switched. Even when I was at my old school, you went from being a freshman and going to college, leaving high school, and then all of a sudden the pandemic hits and you have to switch to all online. And even in high school, I didn't have any online classes. So learning how to adapt and move all remote when I've never had to do that before was challenging, especially because I was remote at my online school, at my last school, and then I moved to Central Penn and I had to come to campus, so it was kind of a switch, and then we went back to remote after Christmas break. So just having to go back and forth, you really have to learn to adapt with how you're studying, when you're studying, making time for homework. And also, I do work a part-time job at Target.
Part-time? You're working like full-time
Well,
hours. I mean,
yeah.
come on.
I do work at another job, so it's kind of just been hard to make sure you have scheduled time for work, homework, and then obviously the class hours.
And you're also a part of the club, and you've already been written several articles and been published in our publication. So it's not even just you're going to school full time. You're working, part/full time. You're part of the club. You're really interested in music, and I know you're very involved with that. I mean, it's got to be difficult for you to kind of deal with this back and forth. So what are some of the things you suggested, some of the things that you've had to do? What are some of the things that you've actually done in order to improve your time management skills?
So a lot of people don't mock it till you try it, but I actually bought a planner and I cannot even begin to tell you how much that has helped me. I never realized how easy it is to just plan out every day and follow that plan and stick to it. In my opinion, that's helped me to not get behind, and just kind of setting reminders on my phone okay, Friday I have an article for the nightly news due, and then Saturday I need to make sure I have all my journalism homework done, and just trying to stay ahead of the game so that I don't fall behind.
And I think that's a valid. I think that's a valid advice anytime.
I use one.
Yeah.
But I certainly think that that's a valid, a way to approach it here as well. So I think that that's definitely some really good insight, and I really appreciate you giving that. So just a couple of more things that I wanted to chat with you about. First of all, again, foundation.centralpenn.edu. There is all types of, and we're going to try to give you some tips for being successful here in our last couple of minutes. So what I want to do is I want to go around, and I want everyone to provide at least one tip for a student in order to complete this essay and do it well, and so they can be high up there on the scholarship list.
Okay, so I would like to say that just because the fact with this essay is that there are going to be multiple winners, and I think that's a key aspect because it kind of makes you feel like it's not a competition. You can just take your best shot at it and apply. You never know what's going to happen, and like what I was saying is I wasn't as nervous to start my essay because I realized there were going to be multiple winners. So it took kind of ease off me to, like, I'm obviously going to keep trying hard and making sure I have an appropriate essay, but it makes it so much easier that it doesn't feel like a competition.
Very true, absolutely. Yeah. Sandy, what's your tip?
I would suggest that you write your essay, put it aside, come back the next day, read it again, put it aside, and read it the third time. Because what happens is, what I've noticed as we're evaluating them, is that you can tell that people write it and hit send. And they don't take the time to look at where the punctuation is, or that it's a run-on sentence that's, 4 paragraphs long kind of thing. So, and that is important when somebody's sitting reading it. They have to be able to get the feel for the student. So I would say write it, let it sit, read it again, then hit submit.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And use Grammarly. I'm like a huge Grammarly fan, and I'm a huge advocate. I actually got the paid version because I got an email right before Christmas. I got an email it was like $75 for a year, and I have been debating, and in my graduate program, it's probably in my best interest to have something like that. MaryBeth, give me a tip for success.
My tip is have someone in the Learning Center review it, because you can never, like Sandy said, review it yourself, but sometimes you don't see your own errors. I myself never see my own writing errors. That's the hardest thing for me to do.
And you use Grammarly too?
I love Grammarly, and you're the one who told me about it.
It's a second set of eyes, and I got to be honest, so I don't want to put out that Grammarly is going to solve all of your problems.
No.
I think a second set of eyes, whether, again, it could be the Learning Center, it could be a professor.
Yes.
Like, I know for my students, I tell them, I'll gladly look it over before you submit it, but it's always important to just have a second set of eyes, even if it's just a roommate, even if somebody is just looking over it to give you an extra hand, because to your point, MaryBeth, when we read our own writing, we know what we're trying to say, and sometimes our brain sort of transposes things, and it makes it sound like it's great, and then when someone else reads it, it's like, this is garbage. Like, what is this? So, one
thing we did not point out is the the essays are anonymous. As we're scoring them, we have no idea. Like, Alexa, if you submitted yours already, I have no idea, because I've already reviewed at least a dozen. I really don't know. So there is no favoritism.
I have 2 tips. My first tip has to do with the word limit.
No.
The word limit is a minimum, and I'm using quotation marks, air quotes, a minimum of 200 words. Let me ask you an honest question. What percentage of the essays that you get are approximately 200 words?
Probably about 30%.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah.
So you know what I've been telling everybody, and I don't think that this is out of line. I've basically been telling everybody that that's sort of a trick to see who is going to go above and beyond the Call of Duty and who's just going to do the bare minimum. Right. And I think it's part mental that you're saying, hey, 200 words, because 200 words is like a paragraph or two. If you really want to win an essay contest, basically, you need to give at least a page or 2 if you're going to be up there at the top. And so my first tip, write at least 500 words, at least. I mean, that's a solid page.
That's nice.
Right? And maybe even a bit more. But I think that's, to me, if I saw a minimum 200 words, I'd say, okay, I got to do at least 500. So that's what I've been telling everybody. And second, and this is a point we always make, Sandy and MaryBeth, the Stabler Foundation. And I don't want to steal your thunder, but I'm going to point it over to you. There is an option on just above where the question is at the bottom of the page that talks a little bit more about the Stabler Foundation, and there's a box to check there, whether you should check it or not. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. The Stabler Foundation has been a longstanding donor for the Education Foundation, and I think last year they alone we awarded $150,000 just from their fund. So that tells you the size of it, considering that last year we awarded $255,000 in scholarships. More than half of that is from the Stabler Foundation. Okay. So the Stablers, when they created their business and their foundation, they wanted it to continue on. So they're asking people to think about when you have the ability to give back, to do that. So on the essay, it says, it basically says that. And this is not a financial obligation. It is a moral obligation.
So you mean you don't have files of everybody and you're not writing that every time somebody donates $50 off of their tab?
You know what I do? What I do is every year I send out an appeal to the people who have received that scholarship in the past, telling them, just reminding them, how did they feel when they got that $500 scholarship or that $1,000 scholarship, and would they consider paying it forward so other students could benefit from that? I don't check to see whether they've given $50 or, usually what will happen is somebody will give me a $500 donation or they'll give me a $1,000 donation. It's a moral obligation. I don't track it. You track it. In your own mind and in your own heart, you are the one that tracks it. If you have signed and stated that you would pay it back, if you don't pay it back, that's on you. That's not on me. I'm not coming looking for you.
I think that I got to just I know we're getting ready to conclude this piece of the podcast, but one of the most heartbreaking pieces of the meetings is when you have somebody that's like a top 5 and would have been in line for a big scholarship, but they just didn't check that box. And I always want to make the point that please check the box. Sandy does not have a running tab on how much money you've donated. It's really just that idea of, look, down the line, if you feel financially stable or you get yourself a good job because of maybe partially because of the scholarship dollars, pay it forward to the next Alexa coming in a couple of years down the line.
Absolutely.
So again, foundation.centralpenn.edu. Very, very simple process. If anybody has any questions, they can always email Sandra Box at centralpenn.edu, and she can certainly give you some more help. I don't care if you know me or not, you can email me, Paul Miller at centralpenn.edu, and I will gladly give you some assistance as well.
I just want one more reminder, because we've had this problem before, so I just want to remind everybody. When you complete your application and you hit the submit button, make certain that you get the notice back that says your application has been submitted. We've ran into some problems in the past where students think they submit and they don't, and then they come back to me and go, I didn't hear from you. That's because I didn't get an application from you. So, it never hurts. Make sure you get that response, but before you hit the submit button, click screenshot for me, so at least that I have some kind of a verification just in case something else goes wrong. Absolutely. So just two little bit helpful hints there at the end.
And Sandy, this summer we're already looking forward to the next golf tournament.
I know.
Maybe we'll have you back on in the summer to talk a little bit more about that.
Sounds great. Thank you.
All right. So foundation.centralpenn.edu, the Central Penn College Education Foundation scholarship application is open through the month of February. So please make sure you fill it out. Well, it will not be another year till we have you on. I'm just going to tell you both that.
Good.
But it is always such a pleasure to have both of you in here. You both, the fact that a major part of your life and your career is going to benefit our students by finding donors and working with our alumni. It's something that would, to me, seem so rewarding. So it just means a lot to me that you guys are both here and so passionate about your jobs. So.
Thank you very much.
Paul.
MaryBeth, thank you and best of luck on the new position. Maybe we'll
Thank you.
be looking in Student Central and Central Station to learn more about what's going on over the next couple of weeks. And Sandy, thank you for spending time here today with us.
Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure.
And Alexa, that wasn't so bad, was it?
No, it wasn't that bad.
Okay.
Well,
good.
we'll be looking forward to having you on again. So, I want to thank Alexa Sugart, Sandy Box, and MaryBeth Fisher for being here today. So that's going to do it for this episode of the Nightly News Podcast. So for Alexa, Sandy, and MaryBeth, this is Professor Paul Miller, and we'll see you again next time on the Nightly News Podcast.
This is Norman Geary, news correspondent. Thank you for listening to the Nightly News Podcast, The Voice of the Knights.
Well, welcome everybody to the Nightly News Podcast. This is Professor Paul Miller, and we're getting ready to be joined by Margie Stuski, who's going to be presenting for the next CPC Film Series that's going to be coming up on Friday. February 19th at 6 o'clock in the Capitol Blue Cross Theater. But before Margie joins us, I'm here with the Nightly News co-president and CPC Film Series correspondent, Leslie Heimbaugh. Leslie, welcome back to the podcast.
I'm thrilled to be here.
Well, we're thrilled to have you. You know, I wanted to have you on a little bit early just to chat with you a little bit about the film series and to learn a little bit more why this is such an interest to you, and then sort of to take a look back at your presentation and now that it's sort of 5 months in the past, 4 months in the past, maybe just a little bit of a reflection about, you know, what the experience was like. So Leslie, ever since you've been here on campus, you know, we ask students to find a beat, so something that they're really interested in here on campus, and you've, for some reason, gravitated to the CPC Film Series. And I'm just curious if you could share with our listeners why this is something that means so much to you as part of what you do for the Nightly News.
Well, I'm such a visual learner, so movies mean the world to me. It's my escape. It's how I unwind and put my brain in park, really. And a lot of times it's not relaxing at all. It ends up being more thrilling. But I look at myself as kind of the mom type figure around here because I'm so much older than your average student. And I feel like I learn so much about life by watching movies. I realize a lot of situations are kind of juiced up a little bit for the film to make the film interesting, but it really inspires me to check something else out that I didn't know about before. And I love, love, love finding out something about humanity that I didn't really realize before. I'm fascinated with all aspects of film. So the actors, you know, how do they get themselves in that state to act, you know, in that character? I'm fascinated by the clothes, the costumes, the set, the scenery, the story, and then what was the director trying to get us to believe by watching this film? What was he trying to teach us? What was he trying to inspire us to do? I just have this very aspirational feeling about movies. You know, they really inspire me.
I think it's interesting because right before we clicked on to record, we were talking about we're both big Chris Nolan and Tarantino buffs, if you would call it that. You know, you're talking about the costumes and the actors and getting themselves. We were just talking about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Yeah.
That was an excellent movie, sort of to take a look at behind the scenes of film, because there were some really key scenes with DiCaprio there that was trying to show him getting into character, and also certainly with the costumes, there was a pretty lengthy discussion about, you know, costumes, and it was sort of a peek behind the curtain, if you will, inside of another movie, of course.
Yeah.
I absolutely love film. I would say that I have to be in the right mood for film. You were talking about putting your brain in park. What I end up doing at the end of the day is watching an old Seinfeld episode or something. That's how I sort of decompress. I have to be in the right mood to watch a certain type of movie. But and I got to be honest, like, this has really been frustrating to me over the last year or so, because literally the only movie that I've gotten to see has been Tenet, which I absolutely love, but there's just been no new movies coming out and not even an opportunity to go to the movies. And all this discussion is centered around, Leslie, what's the future of film? Is it going to be the streaming services? Are the movie theaters going to come back? And I'm curious what your thoughts are on this, because I think personally that the movie theater is a part of the fabric of our society, and to just, oh, well, hey, we can watch them on our own screens at home, that just takes away from what film is intended to be and why it's still so much different than television, even streaming television. So I'm just curious what you see happening in movies going forward.
Well, I too love to go to the theater, and it's part of that community experience. Everybody gets to experience these things for the first time together. And the oohs and ahs and the things that make us laugh and the things that make us cry, it's just such a universal experience. Plus the size of the screen and the stereo and everything. I have taken a deep dive into, the streaming services, and I'll tell you, I've really enjoyed it, and it's forced me to watch things that I may not have given the time of day. I don't have that much leisure time, and I hate wasting my time on something stupid. But I've really taken a lot of chances, and I've stumbled into some really fun things. And I'm also a fan of watching movies more than once, as I've told you. I've seen some movies embarrassingly 20 times, but I get something new out of them just about every time I start looking for different things. But, back to what you originally asked, I fear for the movie industry because it's frivolous and silly sometimes, you think, but it puts a lot of people to work, and a lot of people get to do a job they love to come to every day. And for those of us that enjoy it, it's going to be such a loss if we don't get back to the level we were at before the pandemic.
Well, interestingly enough, we were talking about Chris Nolan, and so basically what happened was earlier this year, Warner Brothers discussed that they were going to release all of their feature films directly to HBO Max, and that includes Chris Nolan works with Warner Brothers. And he wrote, you'll have to read this if you haven't, a scathing article, how mad he was and how adamant, like when Tenet came out, he was just so adamant that it be shown in theaters. He did not want it to be seen on television. And I think that that's what the film industry is going to need.
Yeah.
These directors with clout, the Tarantinos, the Peter Jacksons, the Chris Nolans of the world, to make a stand, to make the theaters still be relevant.
Yeah.
And I do know, Leslie, I don't anticipate a strong summer film lineup, but at the same time, I also am just really concerned long term, but I hope at some day we have the opportunity to come back to the theater. One final question here, and then we're going to welcome in our guest, Margie Stuski. So, Leslie, with the CPC Film Series, you had the opportunity to present Get Out, which, by the way, I've since watched. That was the first time I ever saw it. I've since watched probably 3 or 4 times, and it never ceases to amaze me how the depth of that movie. But I had you on to talk about that before, so I don't want to talk about that. In hindsight, unfortunately, due to illness, you were unable to attend the first your opportunity for CPC Film Series, and I know it absolutely killed you. That being said, as you look back on the experience, what are some of the things that you take away from it?
Well, I mean, it was because I had COVID, and I would have been so excited to see people's reactions. It's just like I said before, it's that community experience. I want to hear what people think. I want to talk about it with people. And I had the chance to do it with an academic audience, which was brand new to me. That's one thing that really attracted me to this series was getting to hear people I respect and admire, have a really smart discussion about films from all genres. Airplane. I didn't think there was going to be something smart to find out from Airplane, but there was. It was wonderful. So yeah, I love being a part of the film series. I love seeing, especially our younger students, get to experience a film and to hear what they thought about it.
And potentially for the first time, because
yes.
a lot of these films are, I don't want to call them necessarily classic films,
Yeah.
though we have had some of those.
Yeah.
But certainly Get Out was the most recent. But for example, The Big Lebowski was
Yes.
late 90s, early 2000s. Airplanes was 70s. I mean,
Yeah.
a lot of the films that we're watching are not necessarily classic films, and I guess you could consider them classics, but more modern classic
Yeah.
films, which I think Get Out would certainly apply.
It's destined to become a classic, I feel.
Leslie, I just want to say one point before we go to break and welcome in our guest. I know that you were so upset that you couldn't make it, and we'd had a conversation about potentially postponing it, and just with the logistics, it unfortunately didn't work. That being said, what you did and the amount of work that you put in it, the amount of thought that you put in it, it was amazing. And while you weren't necessarily standing in front of the room, your voice echoed through that theater, and it was captivating.
So nice.
It was
Thank you.
captivating, and it was. And I guess on the bright side, we still have that presentation.
Yeah.
And that's something that other people could use in a film class or something like that. So, you're going to get another crack at it.
Thank you.
We already have you on the schedule for our fourth quarter movie, and we're not going to release what film you're going to do just yet. But we want to give you another opportunity at it. So
This is awesome. Thank you.
all right. Well, we will be right back with our guest, who is going to be presenting the CPC Film Series for the first one in 2021 of Erin Brockovich. So we'll be right back with Margie Stuski. So stay tuned. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Nightly News Podcast. We are here celebrating the upcoming CPC Film Series. Again, the CPC Film Series is going to come up on Friday, February the 19th at the Capitol Blue Cross Theater. In terms of getting tickets are required. I will put the link along with this podcast so you can sign up for tickets. In terms of social distancing and those types of things, we're going to start off at the theater. We ask that all of our guests come to the theater, and then depending on depending on room restrictions, we're going to be spreading out everybody over 5 different rooms. So we're asking everyone come to the theater, and then we have a team of escorts that's going to take them to the room, and we're going to have plenty of all types of different things in terms of snacks and things like that. So we're going to do the best we can with this through our current situation. So, Margie, welcome to the show. This is your first time on the podcast.
Yes, thank you so much. It's nice to meet Leslie, and it's nice to see you, Paul.
Is this your first time on any podcast?
No. I've had some experience in television and podcasts and things. So.
Well, good. So then you're a veteran.
Yeah.
I like to hear that. So you're going to be doing Erin Brockovich, which is a dramatization, which means it is loosely based on a true story that stars Julia Roberts, who fought against the Energy Corporation Pacific Gas and Electric Company regarding its culpability for the Hinkley groundwater contamination incident. This won multiple awards. It received nominations for Best Picture, Director, Screenplay, and then Julia Roberts won Best Actress. It was also a nomination for Best Supporting Actor. So tons of hardware, won some Golden Globes, made over $130 million here in North America, and another $130 million across the rest of the world for over $250 million gate back in 2000. So let's first talk about a little bit more. Why did you choose this film? Why was this film one that spoke to you so much?
Well, when it first came out, I just adored it. And I think the messages that come through are on multiple levels. And since the program that I'm involved with here, Legal Studies, puts a real emphasis on paralegals in addition to attorneys. So this one will show you from a perspective where someone is coming at it with just grit and determination and maybe not a lot of formal education, but she had the smarts to do things and to really help her attorney get this case won.
I think that's really awesome. You know, one of the things about this, so one of the goals that we have as a film series is to try to engage all types of different groups from our faculty, right? It started initially as the humanities film series, and it started a lot of people from my area. But since then, we've kind of branched out, and we've really been begging people from other areas to come in and bring their expertise. And I think that you did this. That being said, being from legal, there are hundreds of amazing legal courtroom type films. And so I understand your perspective on that, but how did you, were there some other films that were in consideration for you?
Yes, there is. But as you said, a lot of them just focus on the courtroom. What this focuses on is, first of all, the topic, which right now is as timely as it was 20 years ago. You can look at Flint, Michigan. You could see contamination by big companies. And we all sit back and say, well, what can one person do? And what this story shows you is that with the right help, you can make a difference. So we look at the environmental impact of it, and we also look at a woman who was a single mom, which is a situation that a lot of people find themselves in, where they're trying to break into a job, they have their kids to care for, they've got their everyday concerns, but they know that this will make a difference in people's lives. So that's what I wanted to really show through.
Now, just before you came in, we were chatting with Leslie Heimbaugh. So Leslie Heimbaugh is also joining us. She is the CPC Film Series correspondent in addition addition to being our co-president of the Nightly News. So, Leslie, I wanted you to be able to ask some questions here. So take it away.
If I could just make one comment, you mentioned about Flint, Michigan. I just read some research that she actually consulted on the Flint. The water contamination there, and she works with a man who, she goes into the community. He handles the science and all the factual stuff, and she is still the head rallier of people to get them informed, to get them gathering, and to get them moving forward. And it was also so interesting that you mentioned about the fact that she was not educated formally, but she said a mother has every reason to jump into one of these things because we know the impact of the environment on our children and on the future. So I thought that was so interesting. So, I always look at these films for these presentations as something for the students to grab something and run with. What do you hope the students will walk away from with this movie?
Well, the Legal Studies Society, which I'm the advisor and is the co-sponsor of this, they really had some interesting takes on it. And what they were saying is that, yes, it is an award-winning film, but it does have a message that goes across everything. And if we want to do something with environmental, this is some lessons to be learned in that you can see that the community aspect is the most important part. And gathering the information, as I say to people, sometimes people say, oh, paralegals just do paperwork. Well, it's paperwork that wins.
Yes.
And you really need to have that determination. So sometimes when you're in the midst of your studies and you're going, oh, this is going to be hard, this is going to be boring, remember the big picture. Remember that they need each parts of that in order to win and to get a good result.
Right. The movie showed a mix of this determination and passion on Erin Brockovich's part. And by the way, Erin Brockovich feels that the movie was, she says, 97% accurate. But I love the fact that, there are scenes in the movie where you see her arguing against somebody who's trying to offer some resistance to what she's doing. And, Ed Masry is saying, settle down. But it turns out that it's her passion that sways people to understand, and I'm also a very passionate individual, but I think your students can take away the idea of combining some passion with a little bit of dispassion at the same time to get their arguments made, but to make sure that people really get it.
Yes, I've always been one that has relied on my passion to move me forward. And my legal training will keep me within lines, but sometimes you've got to push those lines.
Yes,
and
exactly.
The thing is that I am so concerned with, and we've had so many discussions in class on, is you can disagree with someone, but you have to have your backup for your position, and you have to have respect for the other position. So when she was negotiating, because that's what she was doing, she was negotiating to get everybody signed up, and then she's negotiating within her firm, she's negotiating with the way the case is going forward. She knew where to go, and she also knew when to listen.
Yes.
And that's the most important part of this. It's got to be a give and take.
Yeah. Another fascinating statistic about Erin Brockovich herself is that she grew up dyslexic. She had very well-educated parents, but she was dyslexic. But one thing that she brought to the table was that photographic memory. And there's several scenes in the movie where she can name off a long string of family and connections, and that's her photographic memory. But I thought that was also fantastic to bring out because we all have special talents, and some of the things that are unlikely characters in that talent might come to serve us very well in the future.
And that's really what we look at, because if you find your passion and then you find your skill set, that's the ultimate combination. So you may not be the best public speaker. Maybe you don't want to go in the legal field because you don't like being in front of people, but you can certainly do other things, and there's certainly really important things that can be done that you can develop, and other things compensate for it, exactly what you said. And not everybody has to have that photographic memory,
right,
but you certainly do well by connecting.
Yes.
What I do sometimes when I was practicing is I think and I imagine the picture of the person I'm representing.
Right.
And I'm saying, that's why I'm here.
Yeah.
And even if they're beating me up personally, I'm like, nope, I'm not here for me. I'm here for that person.
Yeah, that's awesome.
May I ask you, and this is sort of aside from the CPC Film Series, and I want to come back to Leslie here. I don't want to get too far away with it. But one question I always ask people who work in the legal industry, What do you think about some of the television courtroom dramas? And are there ones that are maybe more accurate than others?
Well, I think it's good that we have them because that definitely makes people more aware. Things like CSI, that isn't something that even when I was in law school I spent a lot of time thinking about, but it's critical. And in focusing and portraying people as scientific and saying that there's reasons behind we do certain things. And I just think Law and Order is not necessarily the most authentic, but it gives you the most sampling of different things because you have a perspective from the police, you have a perspective from the attorneys. So through all of it, if you're just more aware of what's happening, that's the most important. But it's like my first year students who say that in high school, if they get to go see a trial and they actually get to go see them through our classes, it's a totally different experience. You know, what you can fit into an hour could be several days in real life. So I like the attention. I like it attracts people. I like it gets people interested. But the only way is to go to like court TV and actually watch it if you want to know what reality is.
Yeah, that's interesting. I also saw another really fascinating fact was that Brockovich, in reality, she got chromium poisoning from spending so much time around the water. When she was doing her investigation, and the film actually shows her being sick, but we're kind of led to believe she has the flu or something. They actually filmed a scene because she spent months in the hospital, sick from it. And this film doesn't really show that because they didn't really want to make her into a martyr for the cause. But I thought that was so fascinating.
Yes, she really got into it, and you needed those samples, and she even broke a couple rules getting the samples, but, you know, overall it worked out. Yeah.
I thought it was interesting how she, you know, in this day and age when we're so hyper aware of how people, basically sexual harassment, and, you know, she used her wiles as a way to get what she needed to get done.
That was one thing I wanted to bring up. So basically, to your point, she said that the film was 98% accurate and that the general facts of the story were correct, but there were some minor discrepancies between actual events and what happened in the film. One of those being that Brockovich herself believed that the filmmakers overplayed her using her looks to get things, and she said that indirectly it might have helped, but that she never ever intended to use her looks to get anything in the case. So that was one piece when I was researching for today that I just wanted to bring up and point out. But that being said, it's of most Hollywood major motion pictures that are based on a true story, this is probably one of the most accurate, wouldn't you say?
Yes, I would definitely say. And let me address the issue of using your looks, etc. You have to remember that when I first started practicing years ago, it was mostly a male industry.
Sure.
And everybody wore suits, including women, and we weren't allowed to wear skirts. We weren't allowed to wear anything but skirts, and the judges would tell you that. And is there instances? Yes. I've seen even as much as 5 years ago where a certain attorney would unbutton this or unbutton that, and if they use it, that's their morals. That's their thing.
Yeah.
But overall, the system is trying to make things fairer and not to rely on those things. I think in the movie, they probably thought it was kind of fun and kind of funny.
Yeah.
But in real life, it would backfire, especially if you're in an office. And yes, at first, her dress wasn't something that everybody was exactly happy about, but she did change. And she did get herself. But when she went to court, she was properly attired.
Right.
And so if she was more comfortable dressing down, meeting with her people, then that's something you do. You know, you don't need that suit. She told him to unloosen his tie, get rid of the tie, because you need to be in the environment and speak the language of the people that you're interviewing of. But then when you're in the courtroom, you observe the decorum and you observe the traditions that are there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we've covered so much that I really, had planned to talk about, but she also had the wisdom to videotape her witnesses. And the judge had issued a gag order, so she was lucky that she had all of that. It just speaks to the fact that a person getting into this field has to really use every single idea that they have and try to incorporate that so that they can be successful, whatever their specialties are. I thought that was interesting.
Yes, it is. And that was at a time when we didn't have our cell phones, which now
Yes.
everybody can be a reporter. Just open up your cell phone and let it go at that. So you do have to think ahead. And I think that's what she was good about. It's like playing chess. You know, you want to know where you want to be positioned and what's going on. And obviously, if you're dealing with people who may be sick, may not be available for trial, you need to preserve what you can, going forward. So I just want to put one little plug in. I have confirmed that at 6 o'clock we are going of the night of the movie. We are talking about Erin as an underdog. Well, I'm bringing a super dog. It's Max, the canine officer from Wormleysburg Barrow. He is going to make a guest appearance here as you come, so please come and see him because we're going to be asking for some support for him. But I thought it was a nice contrast because as you talk about Erin as an underdog, think about how well, and I look at it this way, he was an immigrant from across the pond because he came from Germany.
Wow.
He was little. He couldn't even put his vest on for the first 6 months until they got him bulked up. Yeah. And now he's one of our star officers.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Well, that leads to a nice segue. So my last question to you is tell us a little bit more about some of the things that are planned. So we already talked about Max, which is awesome. So doors will open at 6, so be there nice and early at 6 o'clock. Margie's presentation will start around 6:30. But tell us a little bit more about what the Legal Studies Society has going on.
Legal Studies is going to be selling refreshments. We're going to be having some packaged goods, obviously. I don't think we can do bake sale, though we'd love to. And then we also have a fundraiser going on where we have disposable, something to replace your disposable straws. And it's a little container with a permanent straw with a little cleaner in it. And you can put it on your belt and take it with you. And that's a nod to the environment. And it's got Central Penn Legal Society on it and shows our commitment to try and make things better, even if it's in a little way.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I love the fact that the society, that not only that you've gravitated towards this, and honestly, Margie, you were one of the people that in some of our early conversations that we really wanted to reach out to because we knew that you would just be passionate about this, and that's what we are looking for. I got to tell you, this is one of the things that I am just so proud to be a part of, and I think that it's such a great team that we have of people working on this. And Margie, honestly, I just want to thank you so much for clearly putting so much time and effort into making this such a special night, even in the midst of COVID-19. I'm just really looking forward to this just being a great evening, and I just thank you for all of your time and effort that you put into this.
Well, thank you, Paul. I really love the team here. I love the students, and I think there's so much potential that we can do, so we keep pushing the button. Like I said, try and see what we can do despite the obstacles. There's things we'd like to do, but if we have to go a different path, we'll go a different path.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Well, that's going to do it for our episode of the Nightly News Podcast, but one final plug. Friday, February 19th, Erin Brockovich, the CPC Film Series with Professor Margie Stuski. The doors are going to be open at 6 o'clock. The Legal Studies Society is going to be doing some fundraisers. We're going to have Super Dog Max here in the house. Presentation will start at 6:30, film about 7. It's just a little bit over 2 hours, so come out for a nice evening and a nice social distanced evening. Of course, I always want to put that out there. And so meet everybody at the Capitol Blue Cross Theater, and we will get you to your room so we can keep those social distancing guidelines. So, Margie, again, thank you so much for your time.
And thank you, guys.
And Leslie, thank you so much for your time. Leslie has been covering the CPC Film Series for 2 years now.
Yes.
And so after the fact, she's going to write up a really nice article about everything. So I'm looking forward to that. But Leslie, you always take the time to come down here when we're talking CPC Film Series. And I'm just going to kick it forward. You know who the next presenter is after Margie, right?
I don't.
Me.
Oh, wow.
So you're going to have to interview me.
Yay.
So I won't have to interview the guest. You'll have to interview me for next time. But we will talk about that later. Please, everybody, get your tickets. The link will be along with it. So thank you so much. I'm just looking forward to it.
Me too.
All right, that's going to do it for another episode of the Nightly News Podcast. For Professor Margie Stuski, for co-president of the Nightly News, Leslie Heimbaugh, I'm Professor Paul Miller, and we'll see you again next time on the Nightly News Podcast.